Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the BIA's annual housing forecast. I'm Avalee Scarpelli, Executive Director of the BIA of Clark County, and we're so glad that you're joining us this morning. We do see that we still are admitting a few more guests into the presentation this morning, but in the interest of time, we do want to go ahead and get started. For 11 years, we've been bringing you the annual housing forecast via a live in-person dinner meeting, but then along came COVID. So despite not being able to meet in person, we still wanted to be able to provide you with the valuable information so that you can proceed with projection of sales goals and business planning in the most informed manner possible. Before we begin, we want to thank the sponsor of this morning's presentation, the Asivido real estate team. Amy Asivido has a brief message for you.
Hey everybody, BIA. This is Amy Asivido Chrisman here, and I am really excited to be a sponsor for Todd's housing forecast for 2021. I'm part of the Asivido team. We've got a team of 10 agents that we are really excited to meet you. We are working with a ton of you. And I am standing in one of your gorgeous homes. Urban Northwest was so kind as to let us film this video in their gorgeous model in Cedars, which is one of our favorite neighborhoods. Right now, with our incredibly low inventory, our clients can't find homes, and so they are finding land and they are reaching out to you guys. We've got, I think Affinity is building for us. We're listing one that a client had built with Urban Northwest that I'm so excited in Southeast Portland. It's coming back on the market. And then we've got Evergreen, Summit Northwest. We've just got so many, and I'm so sorry if I'm missing some of you, but I love each and every one of your completely different and unique styles. Quail Homes, we've got one, I just remembered. But I am really looking forward to meeting the ones that we haven't worked with. And our team has so much to offer. I wanted to keep this video really short and sweet for you. I know they can be lengthy. So I just wanted to tell you that the mission statement of our team is that everybody have a better day because they came into contact with us, even the mean ones. And I actually asked one of you builders what you would like in an agent. And the answer was someone who has positive communication, doesn't create problems, and is part of the solution. And that is definitely our team. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to the members of the Asivido team. Introducing Courtney Brown, who is a broker in Oregon and Southwest Washington. Introducing Bobby Cedarholm. Bobby is licensed in Washington and soon to be Oregon. Introducing Rebecca Dunn, broker for Oregon and Washington. Introducing Ruth Ann Hughley, broker for Oregon and Washington. Introducing Monica Izuka, and she is licensed in Oregon and all ready to go in Washington as soon as she can take the test. Introducing Kristen Kellogg, office manager extraordinaire and also a licensed broker in Central Oregon. So she services Sun River Bend area. Introducing Lisa Peterson. She is a broker in Washington. Introducing Kimberly Thompson. She is our transaction coordinator and also a licensed agent in Washington. So we are really excited to partner with the BIA. We are really excited to hear Todd's forecast for the year. Thank you to all the people behind the scenes at the BIA for all that you guys do to keep everything running, especially in this difficult time where we can't meet in person, but I'm really looking forward to the time that we can. And I am really excited to see what Todd has to say about 2021.
Thank you again, Amy. It was a pleasure to be introduced to your team, and we look forward to meeting you in person at some point. A couple of housekeeping items before we get on to our presentation. All of our guests have been muted to reduce any audio complications. And then we will also have a Q&A session at the end. So if you have a question, don't necessarily interrupt during the presentation, but feel free to go ahead and type your question into the chat feature on your screen. So now on to the good stuff. This morning's housing forecast will be presented by Todd Britsch, who started his real estate career in 1986 and has spent the last 20 years creating custom reporting services for the new construction industry, along with consulting with builders, developers, lenders, and many other industry professionals. Todd previously was the regional director for Metro Study, overseeing Seattle and Portland services. He is now the senior vice president for Level Capital. Please join me in welcoming Todd Britsch.
Glad to be here. Sorry I can't be there in person. I miss you guys. We've done this for a number of years. It's one of the events that I look forward to doing every year. And my hope is that through COVID is that starts to clean up a little bit, that I can make my way down there for a summer event, and we can do this all over again and share a couple of cocktails at the same time. I do want to introduce to you Jason Zwicker, who is one of our top producing portfolio managers. He has been in the industry for 15 years. Fantastic guy, and he's going to kind of go through what sets Level Capital apart from other lenders that are out there, and kind of what the vision for Level Capital is and where we fit in the market. So with that, Jason.
Thank you, Todd. Yeah, we're excited to be here. Good to get in front of all of you. So yeah, I just want to give a quick background. I know with lending, as builders, it's a lot of generally red tape, and we are bringing a different approach to that. And in such that our owners have builder DNA, is that they currently operate and run a home building company that builds between 75 and 100 homes in Washington a year, and also have lending DNA in their background, also being that they sold one of the largest mortgage companies in Washington State. So they kind of see it from both ends. And I know a lot of times when dealing with banks, it can be a little frustrating because they may not see all the ins and outs of what you operate as a builder and what makes you successful. So kind of the biggest thing is we're driven by the data in the markets, and that's where Todd comes into play, and we're very fortunate to have him. Banks typically underwrite in the order of the market, the market or the builder, and then of course the project. And generally speaking, we feel that if we know our market the best, that's going to have the most fluctuation in the risk, and that will eliminate a lot of the risk as us as lenders. So by doing so, with Todd's data and analytics in the different markets and regions in the States, we're able to provide good risk mitigation for some of the larger Wall Street balance sheets that we bring in to absorb some of the construction space with the financing needs that our local builders need. So we've created a platform through technology to be able to bring basically a mediary for the Wall Street funds that come in, paired with our underwriting and Todd's market research, to allow builders rates as low as 6.75 to 7.75, but have you the flexibility of that private money. So we're trying to fill that void in the market, because we understand sometimes when you're limited to bank financing, the velocity in which you want to build can sometimes be limited. So we want to be able to fill that void without going to direct private or hard money lenders, and kind of make our own little niche in the market there to help you guys grow your business. So with that, I will turn it back to Todd. He is the driving force behind our analytics and why we lend the money where we do, and looking forward to hearing from him.
Great, thanks, Jason. Interesting year to say the least. I think I walked out of the BIA in about 48 hours. Then we started hearing about COVID, and then flash forward a few more weeks, and we were going to have 10 days or 14 days to slow the curve of infection. And then here we are 12 months later, and in Washington State, essentially still semi-shut down. Things are slowly opening back up. I did see that there was a bill that went across that we're going to, hopefully this passes, and put the ownership back on the small businesses to be responsible for people coming in with masks. But this would allow them to essentially open up, because at some point we have to open up the small businesses. We cannot continue to keep them shut down and dictate who can be in business and who can't. So we'll see. We'll be tracking that very closely. Let's talk unemployment. As you guys know, last year we had really good unemployment rates. We were sitting down in the 2 and 3% range. Clark County was the highest at about 4.3. And as we flew through the year, now we're sitting at essentially 7% in Clark, and you can see most everybody else is in the 6 to 7 range. Multnomah is up at 7.2. Now, I don't have December numbers yet. November was the last one recorded. December numbers will probably be out in a couple of weeks. And these are non-seasonally adjusted numbers. And you can see the ride here. Obviously, even through 2008, we hit the peak of roughly 11% unemployment rate, right? And then you flash forward. Luckily, we were only at that 14.9% rate for 30 to 45 days as things kind of began to slow down. And we're currently sitting at 6% for the entire CBSA. 2.8 was the bottom. Those were good times. 2019 was a great year. As far as the labor force change that we've seen over the last 12 months, so we're going to look at this in a couple of different ways. I'll typically track it from year to date and then year over year. Now, again, these are November numbers. Salem, as far as the labor force, was down about 3,800. Washington County down 21. Clark County down a little over 10,000. And then Portland Metro in and of itself down 7,700. And then the Portland MSA, which does include a couple of additional counties of Yamhill and Columbia County, we're sitting down about 8,300. You can see Multnomah, we did add into the labor force. Now this gets interesting because typically, when we're looking at the labor force, if somebody is no longer collecting unemployment, they no longer are calculated into the labor force. And I'm not sure exactly how the states are handling COVID. If we have individuals that are, because obviously we're 10 months into this, some of those individuals should have fallen off of their 6-month unemployment plan. Obviously, during these unique times, that is getting extended out. So they shouldn't have been reduced from the labor force. If that's the case, then what these numbers tell us is the migration due to being able to work from home. How many people are leaving counties that can go outside of the MSA and still work from home? And you're still within an hour and a half commute into the office if you have to go in once or twice a week. This is my particular case right now. You guys can't see it, but I am in Leavenworth, Washington. I am at 2,200 feet. I have 2 feet of snow sitting outside my door right now. And I'm working from my cabin. I go into the office probably once a month, but I'm off on the other side for 2 days a week, where I can typically hold meetings and things of that nature. And the luxury of my job is that I can work from anywhere. Thus, I'm going to Arizona for the entire month of February to work and golf. Employment change. Let's focus right here. Clark County, 48. Year over year employment change for Clark County has lost 48 jobs. That's a net number. We've seen job growth in some sectors. We've seen job losses in others, but that's great. Fared far better than really any other geographical area. You can see Salem was down 1,200, Medford down 4,000, Bed Redmond down 5,000, Washington County down 21, Multnomah down 63, Clackamas down 15,000. As far as Portland Metro goes, when we combine it all, we're sitting down at about 100,000 jobs, and the MSA down 111,000. During the last decade, I mean, this was a hell of a run. We were seeing 2.3% average annual job growth until COVID hit, and then we dropped down that 9%. Where did those job losses come from? So leisure and hospitality, if you look down here on the bottom, oops, my bad. Leisure and hospitality, 45,000 jobs still remain lost. 12,000 out of manufacturing and about 23,000 out of government. You can see from a total recovery. So this is a report that we created. We took the peak of employment, which was either in December or January of late 19, early 20. What was the minimum employment, depending on when that hit? So that could have hit in March, that could have hit in June. So these numbers are kind of all over the board. And then where are we at with our current employment, total job loss, and jobs recovery? And what the percentage over here shows is the recovery to the absolute peak. Now, these are super sectors. There are actually hundreds of individual sectors that are tracked within the BLS data from the state level and the national level that break those out, but those get too cumbersome to go through and look at. This is something that we're going to see continue down here on the government side of things. The states are broke. If you look at the tax revenue that they've lost, whether it's sales tax, whether it's income tax, property tax, all of those things are taking a huge hit on the state budgets. Expect your taxes to go up pretty significantly. I know in Washington State, I read that Governor Inslee just a few weeks ago put a 30% tax rate in. I only read it once, so I got to go back and double check that. But then I also read that he added another 12-cent tax today. So we're talking 42 cents. And again, I have to verify those numbers, so don't be quoting me on those specifically yet. But that kind of leads into somewhat of inflation, cost of living expenses that we're going to run into, and what we're seeing in regards to taxes, obviously. Month over month change. So this is the super sectors broken out. This one is specifically Oregon. Okay. This is surprising to me that we see a month over month change in construction, that construction loses 2,300 jobs. Health, education services is up 15, financial activities is up 30, government change down 1,800, information down 100. And then we get down to professional businesses, trades, transportation, and we start to see some jobs coming back. Washington fared better. If you look, we had gains in almost every single sector with the exception of trade and transportation and information. Washington is recovering at a faster pace than Oregon is. Washington is at about a 96% total recovery. Oregon is down at 94% total recovery. New construction detached. So my streak is over, I'll admit it. If you guys remember, for like the last 4 years, I have nailed the forecast for sales by about 200 units. I think it was the largest spread that I had. Might be a little bit more. I missed it by well over 1,000 units this year. And we can hold Governor Newsom out of California responsible for the increase in sales. There's some caveats to that. So what Newsom did back in, it was either March or April, where he came out and he announced that you no longer have to pay your mortgage. Okay, there's a forbearance program that then, and during these tough times, you don't have to pay your mortgage. Now, legally speaking, he didn't have the right to do that. He didn't own the mortgages. And when we look at the ramifications of that, they've turned out positive. So I'll tell half the story now and I'll finish the story at the end. But when Governor Newsom came out and said, you don't have to pay your mortgage, ultimately what that did is we saw defaults just absolute skyrocket. And in very layman terms, because I want to get this over with quickly, there's agreements that mortgage companies have with Freddie, Fannie, Ginnie when they sell those mortgages off. If somebody goes into default, that mortgage company will then make that particular payment for that individual loss. all of a sudden we had millions of people skipping their mortgage payments because they didn't realize the ramifications of what had happened. Consequently, huge cash calls on mortgage servicing companies. We're talking 20, 30, 40 million dollars a month that were being cash called. And when that occurred, what ended up happening with a number of the mortgage companies is it restricted their ability to lend. And this only went on for about 30 or 45 days, but this almost completely wiped out the mortgage industry. The next step that occurred was the Fed jumped in and started buying mortgage-backed securities. That began to free up the cash. Freddie and Fannie also came out and said, even with the forbearance program, we will now start purchasing those loans from the mortgage processors or the mortgage companies because they understood what damage was being done to the industry. Okay, so that's where I'm going to leave that story off, and I'll pick up on the end of it when we get back because there were positive results that ended up coming out of that. Clark County. So again, detached quarterly sales. You'll see we had 2019, guys, was the best year that we had seen since the peak of the market in 2005. And 2020 surpassed 2019. You will see a little bit of a slowdown here in Q4, right? We were down about 2%. But if we go back to Q4 of 19, we saw sales increase 43%. Sales were still good. You can see we only missed it by a few total units. And I will say that in Seattle, and I'm guessing this in Washington as well, that we had some of the national builders that had hit their numbers already. We had lumber prices that were going significantly higher. And some of the national builders were not releasing inventory for a few weeks towards the end of the year. They had hit their numbers. These division presidents get paid off of hitting their numbers. So holding back inventory, releasing that inventory early in 2021 was kind of the plan. And that is contributing to a little bit of the slowdown in those sales. Here is Clark County. You can see the trends since 2016, just significantly higher. Here's the fourth quarter numbers. Clark County did beat their numbers by last year by about 3%. So really good numbers for Clark. And then this is an anomaly. So if we look at third quarter numbers, this is when interest rates really started to hit the rock bottom. Third quarter rarely beats second quarter numbers. I had only seen it one other time in my 20-year career. And this was consistent across the board. This is really, it was July where we started to see sales really pick up in Clark County and the Portland metro region. Again, because that was when interest rates really started to hit rock bottom. Clackamas County was up 3% quarter over quarter. Clark up 4%. Multnomah was down 32%. There was still too much upheaval going on inside of downtown Portland. That played a role in it. And then Washington County was down 6%. We again see Clark County holding steady at about a 49% market share. This is where we were at last year, holding steady. I anticipate this number to climb to 51% next year, and I'll show you why. This is why. The median available price, Clackamas County's up 11%. This is detached product only, up to $567,000. Clark County, we're only up 3%. That's astonishing to me, being that if we look at, again, the lumber prices and what they've done, that in the last 12 to 13 months has added roughly $13,000 to $16,000 per door. But we've been able to maintain that pricing down and see just modest appreciation on the median list price. Washington County hit 660,000. If you guys go back to some of the presentations that I've done, if you remember, every time Washington County gets close to 625 or 650 on their median list price, we start to see sales fall off. It's a level, we reach a level of affordability issue. Now, the low mortgage rates has significantly helped that, which is why there's some comfortability in raising that price point. But if that continues, then we'll see sales slow down and we'll see more people migrating across the river. The median close price, Clark County is only up 1%. Clackamas is up 11, Multnomah up 18, and Washington County up 9%. And again, you can see the difference between the median list and the median closed. This is new construction only at 592. The concern for me for Washington County is that that price has reached that high. I don't anticipate us seeing the median price rise up to 625,000. We've only seen it once, and it only happened for a very short period of time. And then there was some significant drops in that median price point. Let's talk attached housing. Quarterly sales. Again, this is quarter over quarter. And I go back to the fourth quarter of 2016. You can see we only had about 112 multifamily sales in the fourth quarter, and that was down 9%. Through 17 and 18, we saw declines. And then since then, we've been fairly consistent with increases on year-over-year sales with a few little blips here and there. And most of the time when that occurred, it was an inventory issue. Q3, an 85% jump in the multifamily sales side. Q4, 33%. Really strong numbers. It was an affordability thing. And we saw families migrating out of apartments that couldn't afford single family new construction, so they were moving into townhomes. Clark County, you guys were the driver of that number with a 94% increase. I can't remember the last time that we saw 100 multifamily sales in Clark County. My guess is we'd have to go all the way back to 2005, 2004 to see those kinds of numbers. Kind of the same trend as we came out of 16 and 17. We did see a huge jump in the fourth quarter, but still we're only talking 50 units, and that was 127% increase. 2018, we saw some decreases, and then just in the last few quarters, we've seen some really good increases at 94 and 61%. This is going to continue provided that we're putting the right product out onto the marketplace and that we're very conscious on our pricing. The median available price, Clackamas up 26, Clark up 26, Multnomah up 21, Washington's down 11. So townhomes operate a little bit differently than what we're seeing in single family, especially when it comes to pricing. The square footage of a shift in 100 to 300 square feet can make a huge difference in pricing. So what I'm saying here is that we're not necessarily seeing appreciation in these numbers in regards to the valuations. I think that the overall appreciation is probably around 7-8%, because if we look here, this is your price per square footage. So in Washington County, we saw a 15% change. Townhome unit size, however, decreased from 1,623 to 1,259 on the median size. In Multnomah County, we saw a downward trend of 1,300 to 1,100, which automatically increases your price per square foot. As townhome units become larger, as most of the cost that is put into those units, to add a couple hundred square feet reduces your price per square foot, obviously. Clark County, a 15% change. There was the size increased on average about 200 square feet to 1,700. And then Clackamas County, the size decreased by 100 down to 1,653. So again, when you're looking at townhomes and you're pricing your townhomes, or you're looking at your feasibility for new construction, it is incredibly important that you are comparing apples to apples, looking at your price per square foot consistently, and understanding how those numbers shift and control valuations. As far as inventory goes, Clackamas County has a 12-month supply of inventory. Very little that is currently under construction. We've got most of the inventories completed, ready for sale. Clark County has a 27-month supply total under construction and completed. Multnoma's got a 15-month, and Washington is sitting in an 18-month supply. These are normal. Clackamas is low, but as we know that Clackamas County, we have inventory that pops in, then it goes out. A couple of years later, a couple months later, we'll have a new project that comes in and then sells out. Detached inventories and supply. Vacant lot supply. So right now we're sitting in total just under 5,000 lots for the entire Portland metro region. That only gives us an 11-month supply. So incredibly low. I'd like to see that at around 15 to 18-month supply to help stabilize lot pricing. And I will say that Clark County has still the vast majority of the land in the pipeline. So for you developers out there, still don't anticipate double-digit appreciation in your lots. Working well with your builders, understanding where the price points are, because there is price sensitivity, even in Clark County, for the consumer, especially when we start looking a couple years away. And I'll get into the interest rates and how that's going to impact things over the next 2-3 years. Here's a breakdown of each individual county. It's got our vacant developed lots and our unsold spec inventory. So Clackamas County has a 10-month supply of lots on the market. That's only 792 lots, and a 2.1-month supply of spec inventory. That spec inventory is anywhere from foundation to, normally I'd say completed construction, but I think you'd be hard pressed to find any house in the entire region that has its construction completed. Clark County is sitting at 1,657 lots that are on the market, ready to go vertical, and only a 1.3-month supply of spec inventory. Multnomah is sitting in a month supply of spec inventory with less than 300 lots on the marketplace, still a 9-month supply. And again, Washington County has an 11-month supply, 1,334 total units with a 2-month supply of spec inventory. These are the lowest numbers that I think I've ever seen across the board in the Portland metro region. And then look at the change here. So 2019, we were sitting at anywhere from a 3.5 to a 6-month supply of spec inventory. Particularly in Clark County, we were sitting at about a 4.3-month supply of spec inventory. And now we are well under 2-month supply. And again, Multnomah is at the bottom with 1. Those are sharp drops. Now, a lot of that came in because in Washington, the governor shut down new construction for about 45 to 60 days. That started this complete backlog. We've also run into supply chain issues. A number of things go into play with that. If we look at the number of lots that are applied for, being that our platting time frame in the Portland metro region is about 15 months, 18 kind of on the high end of things, unless we're talking about a master plan community, we've only seen around 1,800 units applied for in 2020. Obviously, we had jurisdictions that were shut down. Early on in the year, we didn't have a clear understanding of how deep this particular recession was going to go. And thank God we're in the housing industry, because obviously we flourished. But the impact early on left so many questions unanswered that there was a delay in us getting out and doing our jobs and finding land and making applications. This will have some ramifications, not a whole lot. I will say this particularly in Clark County, again, due to the fact that 50% of the lots that are in the pipeline have historically been in Clark County. However, if we look at the number of lots that have recorded in 2020, and then the number of homes sold, and then how many of those lots have we extracted out of the market, 3,649 lots in total is what we have pulled out of the, or for lack of a better term, pulled off the shelf for consumers and builders. We have to replace those moving into 2020. And again, we have to be very cautious on what we're planning on charging for those lots and what we're paying for those lots. While we will see some appreciation moving forward in 2021, again, we just have to be cautious on how we proceed with that. Clark County took the biggest hit, losing 1,799 units, and then Washington County down 898 units. And again, 50% of the sales right there in Clark County. Resale data. First quarter, second quarter, a little bit slowing. Obviously, this is when COVID first hit, especially in Clark County. We had restrictions on in-site visits, open houses, the traditional tools that realtors used to sell homes. There was a complete adjustment that needed to be made, both on the new construction side and the resale side, on how to sell homes. And I think we've came out of this as better realtors, better sales and marketing professionals. And then again, as we flow into the third quarter, this is where we saw interest rates drop and drop down well below 3. They should have happened in the second quarter. They didn't, and I'll explain why when I really talk about mortgage rates here coming up. But look at fourth quarter, a 96% jump in the resale. Consequently, that wiped out a significant amount of inventory. And then Clark County pretty much followed the same suit, down 17 in the first quarter, 17 in the second quarter, third quarter up 14, and then the fourth quarter up 95% in resale sales. Okay, so if you guys have this on your screens right now and you can't read these numbers and you have dual screens, move this over to your bigger screen and you'll be able to see the numbers. If you're driving and you're listening to this, I'll try to do my best to explain it. This is sales by price range. So July is really where we started to see that huge spike in sales. What we also saw, again, was when that interest rate dropped below 3%, that increased the buying power of roughly $50,000 for most individuals. So through the first half of the year, really the hottest price range was being between $300,000 and $400,000. 21, 22%, as high as 25% of the sales were happening between $350,000 and $400,000. As we reached into the second half of the year and inventory started to decrease and we got down to that about 2.2 month, 2.3 month supply of resale inventory, we did see pricing start to increase and we had additional buying power. So then the 300 to 350 range dropped from a 22% market share down into the mid-teens. The market share of 350 to 400,000 stayed pretty consistent in that 20, 22, 23% range throughout the rest of the year. However, the 400 to 450 range jumped from 12% of the market to 16, 17% of the overall market. What was interesting is when we look at the $1 million home market, first half of the year, we had 23 homes sold over $1 million. In the second half of the year, we saw 119 million plus dollar homes sell in Clark County. Crazy numbers. Still, the best selling price range was $350,000 to $450,000. I will say over the last 90 days, we've seen new listings come on market. We've also seen a little bit of that declining in sales velocity, which is atypical for November and December throughout the holidays. Because most of the increase that we saw came in October and November. December dropped off sharply. But we've added about 900 units into the available product side of things. As you can see though, if you can see, I know these are small print. There's some of these that I just couldn't help it with, and I apologize. However, what these basically are, so we're breaking out the resale inventory by $50,000 increments, starting at 0 to 200,000 and then working our way up. Really, the only area where we're seeing inventory above a 2-month supply is at the very low end, under 200,000, and at the very high end, above $1 million. So there's 41 units for sale above $1 million. That's a 2.5-month supply. Everybody else is down between 1 month to 1.9 month, and just inventory is incredibly low. Now, I did see so I just want to be clear on this. I saw a lot of people posting on Facebook over the last week that inventory levels had dropped down to a 2-week supply. Yes, they had. My numbers are up to date as of the 14th. So when we saw inventory levels really drop down was in July. We had a 1.3 month. As we hit September, October, and November, that's where we had a 2-week supply of active listings on the marketplace. So the brown bar that you see here represents the pending sales. And you can see the decline that we saw in November and the decline in December as well. Still up year over year. However, we weren't keeping pace with what we saw in that third quarter. Consequently, inventory's up. It skyrocketed to a whopping 1.4 month supply. So absolutely nothing to be concerned about. As we head into the spring season and the buyers are coming back, these numbers will continue to drop downward. So I don't know about you guys, but I'm constantly getting bombarded with this question. Is there a housing bubble? If so, is it going to burst? I watch a number of economists. I watch other individuals that would deem themselves to be housing experts. Some of them are really good, and I get a lot out of what I see. Some of them are paying attention to a fraction of the data out there and trying to depict that, oh, there's another 2008 coming again. So the long and short answer is, well, yes and no. There's a housing bubble, and it's in some areas, and it's already being impacted and felt in others. Areas that are most at risk are areas that have forbearances between 8 and 12%. So those top areas are Miami, where we have a 12% forbearance rate, New York at 10, Las Vegas at 10, Chicago at 8. Now, is that going to happen here in the Pacific Northwest? Unlikely. The last numbers that I saw on our forbearance, we were sitting at around 5 to 6%. And as individuals who'd gone on to forbearance, when they realized there was a balloon payment at the end of the day. So I'll give you an example. My brother is a prime example. He owned a small business. He applied for the PPP loan. He didn't understand how his business was going to survive. So this was April. And the forbearance program came out a few weeks later, and he jumped all over it. At this point, I grabbed him and I said, don't, absolutely not, do a forbearance. A, you don't know if it's going to impact your credit. B, you don't know the process. I said, if you talk to your lender, do you understand what's going to happen? There's either going to be a balloon payment while they say they're going to roll it into the end of the loan, your servicer doesn't have the ability to do that, because that bond is owned by either Freddie and Fannie, who have to approve it, or it's on the secondary market where it's held by some retirement fund, and they don't even know what's in that bundle of CDO that they have. So they're not going to be able to even give you the option to do a forbearance, and you're going to have to make that up. And consequently, when a lot of the consumers realized this was going to happen, they stopped their forbearance. They were perfectly capable of making the payment. But at this point, I mean, if you think back then, I mean, there was a lot of fear. How long was this going to go on? How much damage is it going to do to the economy? And am I going to lose my job? A number of those individuals have started to make those payments and get caught up and make plans if they missed one or two payments, to work with their servicing company and their mortgage holder to work through that process. Now, again, is the Pacific Northwest, is this likely to happen here? Probably not. The affluent renters that we have historically had in Portland and in Seattle, yes, are fleeing Seattle, and they're fleeing Portland. So just imagine, and I'm sure some of you on here had gone through this, where you are now locked in your apartment for 45 days, for 60 days, with your significant other, with a small child, and then the insanity that ensued. You need space. And let alone the amount of turmoil that was going on within our cities at this point. We had already seen a significant number of protests and then riots that occurred in the downtown core, and it just didn't feel like a safe place to be. So this began the migration period out of apartments, and we've even seen in certain areas an increase in listings within townhomes, because those families that had owned their townhomes for a couple of years, maybe starting to have young kids, are now wanting that additional space. Let alone, if you're working from home now and there's two of you and you're in that tight quarters, you need your space. That's what this entire year has been in regards to a theme. I need my space. So we're seeing that. Secondly, the affordability. When we saw interest rates drop down to that 2.5 range, the amount of purchasing power that we gave to the consumer skyrocketed. This allowed a number of individuals to enter into the housing market. The other thing that happened when we locked people down and essentially stopped them from spending money, the savings rate is at the highest level I think we've ever seen it. So particularly for these millennials, and again, I'll use an example. I've got my nephew and his wife. They've been married for about 1.5 years, 2 years. They would go out to dinner 5-6 nights a week. Neither one of them knew how to cook. The pandemic hits. Now they're locked at home. Now they have to learn to cook. Thank God I wasn't over there for those first few meals. They started to realize how much money they were saving and how much they were spending that they didn't need to spend. So now they're looking for their first home because they were able to stuff some money away. This is something that we've seen across the board, particularly with millennials. Their change in thinking has been key. The recovery is happening in most of the sectors. That is one of the most critical components throughout this, is that when we look at where the job losses have come from, it's primarily been in the service sector. Okay? And again, here's something that I'm getting rumblings of, and I believe that Ginny and the VA are going to do a mortgage rollover forbearance. They're going to roll in those loans. So if you've missed your payment for 6 months, if you've been in a 6 to a 12-month, 18-month forbearance program, you're not going to get foreclosed on. They're just going to tack it onto the end of your mortgage. They realized that what happened in 2008 and the losses that were sustained by these companies, it can't happen again. And I do believe that that is going to put pressure on Freddie and Fannie to do the same. Now, again, there's a huge portion of these mortgage-backed securities that are off on the secondary market that are not controlled by Freddie, Fannie, Ginnie. Those are more than likely, and most of the time, I should say, those are conventional loans, 20% down. These are professionals that have good credit scores. And that's not where the unemployment is really lying right now with that sector. And it's really unfortunate for the low income earners, those that make $25,000 to $40,000 a year. Those are the salary ranges that are really being impacted by COVID. Mortgage rates are going to remain low through 21, possibly into 22. I can't guarantee 22. And the reason being is that the Federal Reserve is doing a quantitative easing program and they're buying mortgage-backed securities. Okay. So this is where I'm going to tell the second half of the mortgage story. So if you remember at the very beginning, I started talking about when Newsom came out and said forbearance, it put pressure on the mortgage companies. They had huge cash calls put on them and then slowed down the ability of them to create mortgages because they had nowhere to sell them off. Well, at that point, the Fed says, we've dealt with this before. We saw this in 2008. So, hey, we're going to jump into the mortgage-backed securities market. Problem number two. When they jumped into the mortgage-backed security market, I believe they jumped in with about a $250 billion purchase. And that was right here. This is that huge red line that you see right there. When that occurred, what happened is they came in and they set the MBS market at about 1.25, 1.5. Meaning that's what they were paying for the mortgage-backed securities. There are companies out there that hedge on mortgage rates. What that allows us to do as a mortgage industry, again, very layman terms, is it allows us to lock in rates for our consumers for 30 days. Because we've got companies out there that hedge on those rates and where they're going to fluctuate. When the Fed came in and dumped this massive tranche, that much money into the mortgage-backed securities market, all of the companies that hedge on mortgage-backed securities, all of a sudden, massive cash call because the rate of those mortgage-backed securities dropped from 2.5 to 1.25, 1.5. And I'm not sure on the exact number there. That, again, almost wiped out the mortgage markets. Keith Tibbles, who is the owner of this company, owned a mortgage company and sold it off a number of years ago. But throughout the downturn, the previous downturn of 8 through 12, he was in Washington, D.C. He was working with the Fed and working with Freddie and Fannie through all of the mortgage crisis. I saw the article come out at around 1 in the morning and let Keith know that I saw this occur. He then jumped on the phone. He had an idea that this was coming. He knew that the Fed was going to jump back into the mortgage-backed securities market. However, he jumps on the phone, gets a hold of the individuals that he knows that were working on these committees previously, and we were able to, Keith was able to pull back the Fed's consumption of mortgage-backed securities. And that's where you see this number here, where we saw the shift. Disrupting the mortgage market in such a way, and again, what it came down to is we just wiped out all the liquidity inside of the marketplace. It wasn't a big deal when we did it back in 2008, right? So here's where they first jumped in to the mortgage-backed securities market in 2008. If we look at the dollar volume, the sheer dollar volume of mortgages that were happening in 2008 and 2009, it was a fraction of what we were seeing. As we rolled into the first quarter of 2020, mortgage companies had billions of dollars in promised mortgages out there. Interest rates had dropped down to about 3.5, 3.8%, still some of we had seen in a long time. When the Fed jumped in here and drove the mortgage rate down to 1.25 on the MBS market, you still got other fees that flow in there. So realistically, when this occurred in late January, early February, rates should have dropped to about 2.25. That was the target where the Fed wanted mortgage rates to be. However, it took us about 3 months to get to that point just because of the financial shock that had been done to the market. Again, by Newsom saying you don't have to pay your mortgages, and then the Fed jumping in with such a big tranche of mortgage-backed securities. They have since leveled off, and they are maintaining those interest rates. Now, you guys have heard me talk over the years that the 10-year Treasury controls where that mortgage rate is. Now, the 10-year Treasury right now is sitting at about 1.15, 1.6. And the last time we were at that level, mortgage rates were at 3.5%. Right now, they're at 2.67. Why? Because the Fed is controlling the MBS market. If the Fed jumps out of the mortgage-backed securities market, we're going to see this number rise. So if they pulled out today, mortgage rates tomorrow would jump to 3.5%. If they stop buying the 10-year Treasury yield, which is here, so the blue Treasury securities, look at how much the Fed is spending on Treasury securities. Why are they doing that? They're doing that to keep the Treasury yield down. This controls how much we pay on our debt, how much we pay on the money that we have to borrow to make all the payments. We're still, even with the Fed spending billions of dollars a month on mortgage-backed securities, we're seeing that number rise. Now, if this number happens to drive up to 1.8%, which is still historically not a high number, recent history, yes, these rates will jump up to 4.5, possibly 5%. Now, we all know that when that happens, we have this huge pause in the market. There is an adjustment period, and rates honestly need to be there for a year or two, really, before we start to see consumption enter back into the marketplace. It gets into the whole supply and demand scenario. I don't anticipate the Fed jumping out of the mortgage-backed security market for at least the next year, possibly 18 to 24 months. It just remains to be seen. If home affordability continues to become unobtainable for the vast majority of consumers, the Fed may come in and then reset that Treasury price for the MBS market, and we'll see mortgage rates start to rise. I don't anticipate them dropping down really any further than they are. I mean, they're going to fluctuate in that mid 2 to low 2 range, but I don't see us going down below 2%. Okay. We still have looming challenges out there. Lumber prices are the most volatile that I've seen them. 2021 was bad, 2020 was bad. 2021 could be worse. Supply chains continue to be an issue, whether it's flooring, whether it's appliances. The demand for housing right now across the country is at an all-time high. And when you throw COVID in and the shutting down of manufacturing facilities, whether it's lumber, flooring, everything that goes into a house, we're running into supply chain issues and have for quite some time. Here's where the Fed balance sheet, it continues to grow, and they're buying treasuries at about $120 billion a month. The nice thing about the Fed is that there's no ceiling to their balance sheet. That said, it does pile up in regards to debt. Right now, we are $28 trillion in national debt. That's $84,000 per person that we owe in that debt. It is mathematically impossible to pay that off now. 25 trillion was the magic number. We still have this year additional stimulus programs that are going to go out in excess of $2 trillion. They could go higher. It all depends on how well the vaccine works, how the media plays a role in this, and getting things under control in regards to our spending. Now, the stimulus, it's going to help in the short term, but just keep in mind that we are going to have to pay the piper at some point. I disagree with the way the stimulus has been done. There are individuals that are still working and getting stimulus. They're not the ones that are needing help right now. Plus, there really hasn't been anywhere to go spend the money. Debt, 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 debt. I hate debt. I've owned and operated a number of businesses. All my businesses have been debt-free as I've operated them. That is a huge concern of mine. We talked about this in length last year. I'm not going to get into it again, but it's an overarching concern of mine. Here are the lumber futures. And I didn't really know where to throw this slide in, but I did just bring up what's been going on with lumber prices. You can see the climb here as we came out of COVID, where again, nobody knew what was going to happen. We saw lumber futures decline, and then we saw interest rates drop, spawned housing, lumber futures skyrocketed. And then in one day, that was September 11th, they plummeted. Then they rose, and then they dropped again, and then they come up. And throughout the entire election process, they've been going all over the board. There are so many things that are playing a role within lumber futures right now. You have some lumber mills that were shut down due to COVID. You had tariffs that were put on Canada early on, well, last year actually, in 2019, and then in 2020. Those have loosened restriction, but getting lumber across the border when Canada shut down the border completely, that put restrictions on it. You also had during COVID record-setting home projects that were going on. So Home Depot stock skyrocketed because the number of people that were building decks, putting up fences, remodeling their houses, pulling cash out to do these projects through mortgage refis. It has all put a huge strain on lumber and the ability. The other thing that has happened that has impacted lumber is the demand for paper has dropped significantly. So when we look at the cost of a tree and where the pulp comes out of the mill, well, there's no retail for that pulp. So now we have to make up the cost of that tree in the form of lumber. So again, there's 5, 6, maybe even as many 8 things playing a role in what's going on with lumber. Now, the only way that we're going to see lumber prices come down over the next 12 months is if housing demand declines. And I don't see that occurring. So get used to your lumber prices being somewhere between $600 and $800 a linear foot. Now, for the builder, where the concern lies in, and for the lumber companies, you have to figure that when a lumber company pays $900 a linear foot for their linear thousand for their lumber, and then they see a drop in futures, historically, we would see pricing drop within 2 to 3 weeks. That is not the case right now because the market is fluctuating so much and so often. Lumber companies are operating on what they paid for the lumber and their replacement cost. Unlike the oil industry, you see a gas station, you see barrels of oil go up $50 a barrel, all of a sudden you're going to see your gas jump by $2 a gallon. You see oil drop by $50 a barrel, it's going to take you weeks, if not a month, before you see that oil price come down. So that's where the lumber industry is right now, and it's just in pure chaos. I'm going to end on the upside here. The good news is millennials are buying. They are exiting their apartments. Their bars are shut down. Downtown corridor is not what it was 2 years ago. most of the amenities in the downtown core are gone. They're working from home. They want more space. They're starting to have children. Personal saving rate at an all-time high. Consumer habits are shifting all across the board, every generation. How we spend money, where we spend money, and where we save money. Again, mortgage rates are going to remain low through 2022. There are currently 23,000 jobs posted in the Portland metro region. 531 of those allow for remote working. There are 7,500 jobs that are at 50,000 plus, 4,500 that are at 60,000 plus. And then I know this kind of plays on both sides. So this is an upside chart or an upside talk here. But roughly 75% of those that are unemployed are not home buyers. These are those that have worked in restaurant service industries and they're apartment renters, where their median incomes are at around $35,000 a year. These are not the individuals who are purchasing homes. Now, there's good news for them in that every housing market has a cycle, and we are in the midst of that cycle. When it is less expensive to rent than it is to buy, we have people entering into the rental market. When it is less expensive to purchase than rent, just the opposite. And that's where we're at right now. We have a number of people where it makes more sense to purchase a home than to rent a home or rent an apartment. Rental rates are down anywhere from 10 to 20%, depending on where you look right now. And that's not including some of the benefits that they may get, whether it's 2 months free, whether it's you don't have to pay a pet deposit or last month's rent, things of that nature. And we're going to see this trend continue all the way through the end of COVID. And I don't think that the restrictions are going to completely go away for another year. I'd love to say it's going to happen in the next 6-7 months, but I don't think that's going to occur. And as long as interest rates are down and we have some sense of affordability, we're going to continue to see vacancy rates in apartments rise. Well, what does that do for individuals that are inside the apartments? It's going to drop down their rent. For the apartment owners, this is going to be a 3 to 5 year hard struggle. On average, right now, nationally, 25% of rental occupants are behind on their rent. While there was some forbearance on your rental mortgage payments, we're into this 10 months now. If we are going to see REO in the marketplace, I believe it's going to come in the form of apartments over the next 1 to 2 years. I don't foresee a significant amount of foreclosures occurring and disrupting the overall market in the Pacific Northwest. It may happen in New York, it may happen in Chicago, and it may happen in other areas across the country. I don't believe it's going to happen here. We are still seeing significant in-migration out of California, San Francisco in particular, and those individuals are coming up here to buy. Because even if you can work from home, that synergy within the office is still going to need to occur. So I believe that, yes, this is going to be the new norm. I hate that term, by the way. But as we shift into 21 and 22 and years 23, the ability to work from home is going to stay. But you're not going to be able to be 200, 300, 400 miles away from your office for the most part. There are going to be some jobs that allow that to happen. I don't speak in absolutes most of the time. But we're going to have those individuals that they need to be in the office 1-2 days a week. You need that synergy, especially if you're working in the tech sectors, which, if we go back over the last couple of years, we've talked about that's really where we're going to see the vast majority of the job growth moving into this next decade. So that is it, guys. I'm going to leave my contact information up here. There's my email. If you have questions that you don't want to bring up to the group, feel free to ask. I'm sure there's some questions that have been typed into the chat room that we can discuss.
Yeah, Todd, we have three. So I'll start off with the first one that was asked. Somebody asked, are we tracking the movement of contractor and subcontractor labor from Oregon and Washington? And are we seeing we are seeing a 4 to 6 month delay on remodel work due to labor shortages?
Yeah, so I don't have the numbers on the migration of that labor force, but yes, I will say that in a time like this where we've got demand all across the country, that labor force is going to shift to where they can make the most money, and it'll be in relation to affordability for them. And I don't think that labor shortage is going to go away anytime soon.
Perfect, thank you. The second question was, how will the eviction moratorium affect the market?
I don't think it's going to impact the residential market, so the for sale market. This gets back into the apartments. There are a number of single family residences out there that have become rentals. And if we look at where inventory levels are, if those owners get a little bit panicked about the fact that they've been having to make the payment for the last 8 months and their renter is refusing to leave, once that rental or that eviction moratorium is lifted and they're able to get evicted, my guess is probably 20–30% of those individuals will sell their units. But the rest of them, they've made so much equity in the last 1 to 2 years that walking away from that and giving up on becoming a rental owner, because I truly think that is one of the areas that is going to significantly grow in the next 5 to 10 years is single family home rentals. We look at the population that is moving out of the downtown core, and they're paying upwards of $3 a square foot for an apartment in downtown. Even if they don't have the money for a down payment, I'm going to go pay $1.50 a square foot for a single family home because I don't have to commute in every day. So we're going to see single family rental rates actually rise in the next 2 to 3 years pretty significantly.
Thank you for that one as well. And the last question is, a few years back, you had mentioned some world or financial event that was projected to happen in 2035. Can you remind us what that event is and if the pandemic has impacted that at all?
Yes, so actually that was 2025. And that was when the debt became mathematically impossible to pay off. And then if we had looked at the trend on the Treasury notes at that point, the debt load that we were unloading, and mind you, the debt load was only going to be at 20, like I said, 25 trillion. Now it's at 27. And by the end of next year, it's going to be at $30 trillion. Again, it's mathematically impossible to pay off. The pandemic, what that allowed to do was the Fed dropped the rates. And because of the investment world, we had an absolute flood into US Treasuries. When that occurs, that drives down those rates. Now, if we run into significant inflation, which happens when we flood the markets with money, which is what's happening, I don't know if or when this will hit. But the amount of money that we're spending right now is absolutely unsustainable. And it could potentially still create problems within the next 4 years in 2025. If it is not remedied in that time frame, yeah, 2025 is still a really bad year for me. But I also finished that off with the Fed and the Treasury have to behave perfectly between now and then to avert something catastrophic from occurring. Right now, they are. And you've got the Fed that is buying junk bonds, companies that wouldn't be able to be alive today if they hadn't put forth the bonds, and there were no purchasers in the bond market. So the Fed jumped in and did that. The Fed is purchasing pretty much anything they possibly can to stabilize the economy. And it will turn around. Just anticipate your taxes going up significantly over the next few years.
Thank you. So we actually got another question come in, and it is, what are your inflation forecasts? At what point does inflation reach the Fed target of 2%?
Well, I think the Fed actually needs to kind of change the way they forecast inflation, because I think we're already at 3 to 4. When you look at just the overall cost of living and how much it has gone up in the last year for the day-to-day consumer, your grocery bill, your power bill, all of it has gone up, and that's going to continue. And I think from the Fed standpoint of how they monitor inflation, I think it's 3 years away, and we could talk for an hour, another hour and a half or hour on what's going to happen 3-4 years from now if that inflation occurs. God forbid we see hyperinflation, because hyperinflation will cause all rates to rise, and then we'd be staring down a 1970s scenario all over again. I'm not calling for that. Just a reminder, people, I didn't say hyperinflation was going to happen.
We got another question too. Bond traders are already forecasting inflation increasing, and we're selling treasuries in the first 10 days of the year. They're wondering if they're wrong.
No. So the more we have in debt, then the strength of the dollar decreases. As the strength of the dollar decreases, we start to see the treasury yields rise. So again, we've seen the 10-year treasury go up about 75 basis points in the last 35, 45 days. That may continue. However, the short-term concern is not there because the Fed is buying up the MBS market. Where the concern lies is if that treasury yield continues to go up as less investors come into the market, because it's the treasuries are not set by the Fed fund rate. The treasuries are set by supply and demand. And yes, there's a number of concern from investors right now because of the Biden administration's plan on stimulus. And it also throws in the fact that all 3 chambers are run by Democrats. There's no balance. This is not political, guys. I don't like it when there's any one party controlling everything. There is no check and balance. And right now there is 0 check and balance going on. So when you look at the far left radical agenda and what they want to do in regards to spending and the skyrocketing debt and the new Green Deal, forgiving college, free medical. I mean, if Ocasio-Cortez got her way, you would see the debt skyrocket to $40 trillion within the next 12 months. You would see bond rates skyrocket because nobody's going to want to buy them. And then all hell breaks loose. I don't think that's going to happen. Again, don't quote me on that stuff because I don't think it's going to happen. And there are way too many what if scenarios. Try not to go there.
Well, we want to be respectful of everyone's time, and we promised that this presentation would be an hour, and we actually got Todd for a little over an hour today. So thank you again, Todd, for providing the valuable information that you provided for our members today. And thank you again to the Asivido real estate team for sponsoring this morning's presentation. And with that, we hope that everyone stays busy, safe, and well. Have a great afternoon.